I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
Oh, has it been a week? It feels like it's been a month.
Sure has.
John and I started this show in April. We were worried about Trump's early signs of dementia, his severe personality disorder, his autocratic leanings, let's say, or strong immutable tendencies, let's say. We've been seeing all of that this week on display. And John and I have gone back and forth with this show, either pointing out as clinical psychologists Trump's severe personality disorder, his compulsive lying, his criminal instincts. And we've also been trying to support all of you and each other as we braced during the interregnum between the election and his inauguration. But now things are full swing, and they are worse than even John imagined, and certainly worse than I imagined. John?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions at the beginning about how bad it would get and how quickly that would happen. And you were a little bit more. We actually had a wonderful guest who I keep remembering, Lori Weiner, who talked about, who studied Hitler and said that it took 57 days for him to collapse the institutions of democracy. She took us through the timeline in great detail. And at that time, we said, well, America's not Germany. We're a much bigger country. We have a history of democracy. It's, there are checks and balances. There'll be sources of resistance. There'll be things that slow things down. And primarily that was your position. And I was saying, I think they're going to go faster than people expect. Well, of course, this has been, and this is the word that I used last week, but now I'm seeing it in all of the newspapers, a blitzkrieg.
Yep.
Right? A blitzkrieg against democracy, a blitzkrieg in terms of an unprecedented effort by the president to collapse his own government. And the government has very little powers of resistance against an executive who wants to destroy his own organization. One of the things that we've talked about, though, is Harry, you mentioned that we started the show looking at things from a psychological perspective. And sometimes we can get a little lost in being pundits. But one of the things that I think is very psychologically important to understand is that one of the reasons this is going at such a breakneck pace, we described it last week as a manic pace. Actually, technically, it would be more accurate to call it a hypomanic pace.
Yes, thank you.
Hypo is Greek for less than. So it's less than full-blown mania, because full-blown mania would be insane, literally, and psychotic, and no one would go along with it. But hypomania, most charismatic leaders are hypomanic. They have this energy, this charisma, this creativity, this confidence, this arrogance, this action orientation, all right, that inspires other people, that galvanizes other people, both for and against them. And so one of the reasons that the institutions of democracy seem to be being swept away at a hypomanic pace is because it's being driven by a hypomanic. There is a hypomanic human being driving this pace, and that person is Elon Musk.
And wait, John, it's Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They both
absolutely
exhibit signs of hypomania. And just to remind our audience, hypomania is observed by intense energy, often sleeplessness, pressured speech, a flood or a race of ideas, often impulsive, self-defeating or self-destructive actions. But there's a great deal of energy. And as John wrote about in his really seminal book called The Hypomanic Edge, American culture loves hypomania. We are the culture of hypomania, probably second to Italy, because we really appreciate that kind of energy. Think of rock and roll that was invented here. Think of stand-up comedy that was basically invented in America. Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy. These are all public figures who channel and harness hypomania for creative purposes. And as John points out, you often see politicians, because hypomania and charisma is often correlated, but not always. Barack Obama was an extraordinarily charismatic and powerful politician. and I don't think he shows any signs of hypomania. So there are exceptions to the rule.
Well, you make a couple good points. One is that, yes, I believe that Trump also has a hypomanic temperament. I actually wrote an article about that in the 2015 in the New Republic. But I think what's happening here is he's so exhausted in terms of his dementia and his really inability to focus on anything for more than a few seconds at a time. I sometimes refer to Elon Musk as sort of the Darth Vader to Trump's emperor. The emperor never does anything, right? He's just this shadowy old sort of figure, if you know the Star Wars movies, but Darth Vader is his general, who's extraordinarily powerful and able and destructive, right? And he's the one that actually leads the wars against the other planets and takes over. So Musk is that young buck that has the energy and the mental clarity to actually, and now, of course, it's not just Musk. We've got the whole Project 2025 team. So I think there was a certain hypomanic, rageful energy that all of these people have. Hegseth just can't wait, to get wasted and lay waste to the, the Department of Defense. So they're all raring to go. But I think Elon Musk is in a uniquely powerful position. And I think he's in a little bit of a class by himself, both in terms of his power and in terms of his hypomania. So I just want to start out by looking at 3 tweets that Elon Musk made, that looking at this through the eyes of a psychologist, it's quite clear we're looking at someone who is hypomanic. Doge is working 120 hours a week. Our bureaucratic opponents optimistically work 40 hours a week. That's why they are losing so fast.
Now, that is one of the most hypomanic things I have ever heard.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Isn't it?
Textbook.
I work 300 hours a week and everyone else works 40, so I'm going to beat them. Okay. All right, let's look at this next one. We spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. Could have gone to some great parties, did that instead. The reason I wanted to point out this is one of the things about people who are hypomanic is they're very arrogant and, they can be very, also very reckless. And here's how obscene this is. This is the richest man in the world terminating aid to the poorest human beings in the world and gleefully joking about it. So I just felt like I had to include that one.
And there's also that hypomanic false intimacy. Like he's just talking right to you. Hey, could have gone to a party, destroyed this agency instead.
Right, killed millions of people instead. Could have gone to a party.
Hey, yeah.
But I wanted to do something more fun. Let's see that next tweet. So this one's embedded in a tweet, but I'll read it to you. Very few in the bureaucracy actually work the weekend. So it's like the opposing team just leaves the field for 2 days. Working the weekend is a superpower.
Oh boy, there it is.
So there it is. He's talking about his hypomania as a superpower, that he can work more days than the bureaucrats. He's also clearly making it clear that the bureaucracy and the bureaucrats are the enemy. Right, that he's working to outpace, and so this is the mental state of the person we're working with. We also know that he's moved beds into his office space in the executive office building and built a team of mostly young, worshiping engineers who are with him. They literally are working 120 hours a week. They're sleeping there.
John, there's 6 of them, and some of them have not gone to college. Some of them are 18, and these are the people putting flash drives into the information in the Treasury. I mean, this is what we're looking at. Yeah, very dangerous.
So the New York Times had a very long, in-depth article about this takeover by Elon Musk. Inside Musk's aggressive incursion into the federal government. These quotes are a little bit long, but it's important, so I'm going to read these to you, and we'll look at them one at a time. Mr. Musk, the world's richest man, is sweeping through the federal government as a singular force, creating major upheaval as he looks to put an ideological stamp on the bureaucracy and rid the system of those who he and the president deride as the deep state. The rapid moves by Mr. Musk, who has a multitude of financial interests before the government, have represented an extraordinary flexing of power by a private individual. The speed and the scale have shocked civil servants who have been frantically exchanging information on encrypted chats, trying to discern what is unfolding. Senior White House staff members have at times also found themselves in the dark, according to two officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe sensitive discussions. One Trump official who was not authorized to speak publicly said Mr. Musk was widely seen as operating with a level of autonomy that almost no one can control. Very few in the bureaucracy actually work on the weekends, so it's like the opposing team just leaves the field for 2 days, Mr. Musk posted on X, which I already read to you. There is no precedent for a government official to have Mr. Musk's scale of conflicts of interest, which include domestic holdings and foreign connections, such as business relationships with China. And there is no precedent for someone who is not a full-time employee to have such ability to reshape the federal workforce. The historian Douglas Brinkley, who I respect immensely, described Mr. Musk as, quote, a lone ranger with limitless running room. He noted the billionaire was operating, quote, beyond scrutiny, saying, quote, there is not one single entity holding Musk accountable. It's a harbinger of the destruction of our basic institutions. Lastly, Mr. Musk, the leader of SpaceX, Tesla, and X, is working with a frantic, around-the-clock energy. This is what we were just discussing, familiar to the employees of his various companies, flanked by a cadre of young engineers, drawn in part from Silicon Valley. He has moved beds into the headquarters of the Federal Personnel Office, a few blocks from the White House, according to a person familiar with the situation, so he and his staff, working late into the night, could sleep there, reprising a tactic he has deployed at Twitter and Tesla. So, Harry, evil never sleeps.
Well, evil is very excited.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you remember Musk jumping up and down and giving the Nazi salute? He's
yeah.
Well, but he's got the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And I think Brinkley is wrong in only one regard, which is that Trump could kick him out. Trump could say you're done. It's just that when they asked Trump, he said, well, Elon's doing everything that I want him to do. And if he does something I don't like, I'll tell him to stop, which is a way of...
When does the emperor ever fire Darth Vader?
Well, no. All right. I want to take you up on this Darth Vader thing, because I don't disagree with you that Musk is here to do the things that really, not only is Trump having problems cognitively to be able to think about, but also he doesn't want to think about it. Elon said, I want to cut, $2 trillion out of the budget. You can't do that and touch entitlements. You can't, or the defense budget, right? And so he's cutting it out everywhere he can, firing employees, making promises he can't keep, also getting a hold of confidential data, and Trump is letting him do it. I don't think really of Trump as the emperor. I think of Trump as the guy who needs to be worshipped, needs to have a lot of power, needs to always be right, and he's letting Musk do the things that will get him there, but he still maintains control in his fragile way. I think. Should we look at the press conference?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So a lot of our viewers have been asking us to go back to looking at Trump and his cognitive decline. And as I said last time, we're not seeing that much of him. And when we do, it tends to be in the morning or afternoon. We haven't seen an evening speech yet. And I predict we will see very few of them, because he tends to get more disorganized at night. And this press conference came after that horrific crash between the American airliner's jet and is it a Seahawk helicopter, I believe. And Trump was really in an interesting position, because first of all, it happened on his watch in DC. Terrible crash. No one survives. And the guy that he had assigned the transportation secretary hadn't gotten around to naming a head of the FAA. So there was literally no one there to handle this crisis when it happened. So Trump did what Trump does, which was he made up an excuse that this crash happened. He didn't say it really did, but it could have happened because he had tightened up, gotten rid of DEI constrictions on the Department of Transportation, and that Obama had loosened, and then he tightened them. Then Biden did one worse and made it much worse, and now that's why this happened. Absolutely no evidence for it. I mean, zero evidence for it. And in fact, he's even challenged by Peter Alexander, who's turning out to be one of the toughest reporters on the beat. He has been, but he's getting even tougher. But we're going to show you how he sets this up, because what he wants to do is deflect any sense that his administration was responsible for this.
Here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program.
Now, look, first of all, people have been interviewed about this. Absolutely no one was hired in as an air traffic controller recently. And second of all, none of them were brought in with mental disabilities. That's just made up. It's true that in the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg wanted to open things up to more people, but this is just a lie. And he's so confident when he lies.
I thought the control tower was like a sheltered workshop. It was like to help people with disabilities gain confidence and skills. No, that's not.
No.
I heard that on Fox. It's not true.
It's not true.
Okay.
And now someone asked him, well, how do you know this had anything to do with the crash? And this is what he said.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Because there's common sense. Look, whenever anything goes wrong, the first thought that I always have is obviously some black person or some woman who works for this organization caused the fuck up. I mean, come on. We don't want to say it, but we all know it's true. When something bad happens, it's got to be the black guy or the woman who fucked it.
Well, because they're less intelligent, you know.
Yeah, so if you're going to include them,
they don't have an uncle who is a professor of physics at MIT the way Trump did. It's so despicable. I can't believe it. Now, Peter Alexander challenges him on this whole idea. And listen carefully to it, because Trump shuts him down, and you can see him, and he finally ends up by saying, quiet, quiet.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment, because the U.S. ice skating community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real, but the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's website.
Who said that, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the
Take
entirety.
a look what I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration,
nice and easy.
too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in, and he changed it. And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
Please.
Respectfully, it was on the website.
Quiet.
I mean, if you listen carefully, there it is. This FAA diversity thing was on the website from 2013 during his administration, from 2016 to 2020. It's all made up. And he did this in order to distract the public from any responsibility. And then in the middle of this, he attacks Pete Buttigieg.
Well, Harry, the key qualifier in your statement is if you listen carefully, which 99% of the country doesn't do.
I know,
and it's like 3-card Monte for those of you who didn't grow up in New York, where there'd be guys on the street who would say, if you find the queen, I'll give you $5, and you bet money and you think you see the queen, but it's a shell game, right? So it's like, no, Peter Alexander is catching him in a lie.
Right.
The policy is the same as it was during your presidency. Nothing has changed. And he just lies. When caught in a lie, he just tells them another lie. No, actually, I changed it better. It was Obama was terrible. Then I changed it. And then I changed it back and blah, 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 blah. And by the time he's done, do you think anyone is really following it?
John, it's even worse. He repeats the same lie. He repeated same lie.
Works.
But we are here to urge everybody to pay attention. And we're going to show moments like this, and you have to pass them around. I really mean it. We can't let this kind of lying just take place like this. It's absurd. Now, I just want to get to the Pete Buttigieg thing because I think it's really vicious.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
Now, he cited nothing, but John, I think there's a little bit of a cognitive slippage because two things. One, he couldn't remember South Bend. It ran his city. And also, he called it bullshit in a conference. Now, that's really dysregulated, don't you think? I mean, most presidents don't swear like that when talking about somebody. I mean, it was uncalled for, and it's a little lack of self-restraint or self-regulation, I think.
I agree. Increase in obscenity can be a sign of dementia and of people losing control. And he has so little internal standards that it's hard to know, but it really is outside the boundaries of of what we would expect from a president. The problem is he does so many things that are outside the boundaries. It kind of hides his deterioration in plain sight.
Well, it's like the blitzkrieg you were talking about. He does it in all kinds of ways. I just wanted to show you. I'm a big fan of Pete Buttigieg, by the way. I think he's super smart. Such a contrast to Trump. Buttigieg can speak whole paragraphs spontaneously. I mean, he is one of the best minds. Knows 3 or 4 languages, with a CIA analyst in Afghanistan. I mean, it's just
no. I know. I still have a Pete Buttigieg for president T-shirt. I wear it to bed. I don't wear it out in public.
He would have been the best president.
He would have been the best, but he was an Obama. I mean, he was really smart, really, really smart.
No, and he did a great job at transportation. Here's his very measured response. Despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. Now, I think that's a great response.
Me too.
And really irrefutable. I mean, it's not like he just lied about something. He cited the record. So lastly, John, you found this, and it's one of my
favorite. I found a clip of Chris Murphy with, and maybe this is in character for us, with a very unmeasured response that I happen to like.
Me too. I love it. Let's see it, Rex.
I just watched some of Donald Trump's press conference about the tragedy last night, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. First of all, our hearts go out to the victims' families, to the first responders. This is awful. But what is also awful is to watch the President of the United States stand up at the White House and claim that it is women or black people or Latinos working at the FAA that caused this crash. This idea that by hiring non-white men, you are putting the nation's safety in jeopardy, or that non-white men caused this crash, is unconscionable. We need to get to the bottom of what happened. Nobody's going to know today what caused that crash. But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know, it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash. There are some true things. President Trump forced out of office the administrator of the FAA. He's been waging a regular assault on public employees since he came into office. He forced the entire Aviation Security Review Board, Advisory Board, to step down. We don't know whether those things had anything to do with this crash, but we should take the time to get to the facts. And everybody in this country should be outraged that Donald Trump is standing up on that podium lying to you, deliberately lying to you about what the cause was, and further using the White House as a means to try to divide us from each other. That performance was disgraceful, and every single senator and member of Congress should call him out for how disgraceful it was.
No, I think that was terrific. I don't even think it was over the top. I think it was very strong.
No,
I think Chris Murphy is emerging.
Yeah, I do too.
As the leader of the Democratic Party. I can see him running for president with Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. That'd be a fantastic team, the two of them. But he's really eloquent, and he also spoke brilliantly at that rally yesterday. So I think we're starting to see the beginnings of resistance, and it has to be fueled by anger. Like that. It has to. Yeah. If Chuck Schumer going, it has to stop, is
that has to stop. No, I appreciated his outrage. He said he used the word disgusting, and then he felt he had to repeat the word disgusting in the next sentence because it was that disgusting. It was disgusting squared. It's not common sense that everything that goes wrong is because of women and black people. That's not common sense. That's actually calumny. That's actually an outrageous, disgusting charge.
Agreed. And baseless.
Exactly.
And by the way, there's been another crash in Philadelphia since then. There was another close call. I mean, now that we have the FAA basically without senior staff, and we're seeing this, and Chris Murphy says, well, I'm not saying that has anything to do with it, but let's investigate. And this moron is claiming that it was because of diversity.
And what's scary though is, one of the points is when are people going to wise up and start to connect the failures that we're going to be seeing going forward, right? As they pursue these dysfunctional policies that are meant to basically unravel the country. Are they going to be able to use their disinformation system so that, when the 50th plane crashes 3 years from now, will it also be because of DEI? Is that what people will be saying when I go see my relatives or friends who watch Fox News? They can say, oh, it's a shame. It's a shame these planes keep crashing because of Biden's DEI policies. I mean, is that what we're going to hear?
Look, there comes a point in every administration where they have to own it. Not the first, though? It does. It happens in every administration.
All right.
But not the first 3 weeks. And unfortunately, not the first 6 months. He's got like a 6-month window to say, hey, I'm still cleaning up Biden.
Yeah. Right.
Although it's all lies.
Right. So look, the next thing we're going to look at is, we've said that it's only real if it's in the New York Times and the New York City, Jewish sensibility is the New York Times is the paper of record. So it's very, very important. This article that appeared today, we had our show all set up and I wedged this into the show because I thought it was so important. Harry, maybe you can read this for us.
Sure. Trump brazenly defies law in escalating executive power grab. In the radical opening weeks of his second term, President Trump has appeared to feel little constraint to show respect for the rule of law. In his first term, President Trump seemed to relish ripping through the norms and standards of self-restraint that his predecessors had respected. 3 weeks into his second term, hand-wringing about norms seems quaint. Other presidents have occasionally ignored or claimed a right to bypass particular statutes, but Mr. Trump has opened the throttle on defying legal limits. We are well past euphemism about pushing the limits, stretching the envelope, and the like, said Peter M. Shane, who is a legal scholar in residence at New York University and author of a casebook on separation of powers law. The array of legal constraints Mr. Trump has violated, Mr. Shane added, amounts to programmatic sabotage and rampant lawlessness. Mr. Trump has already nullified laws, such as by ordering the Justice Department to refrain from enforcing a ban on the wildly popular app TikTok, and by blocking migrants from invoking a statute allowing them to request asylum. He moved to effectively shutter a federal agency Congress created and tried to freeze congressionally approved spending, including most foreign aid. He summarily fired prosecutors, inspectors general, and board members of independent agencies in defiance of legal rules against arbitrary removal.
And so you can see in that table, Harry, there's 8 laws that he's already broken.
Oh, it's incredible.
Right. So the point is that this is a lawless president whose mission is to destroy the rule of law. It's not just that he's violating this law or lying about that. He's looking to destroy the rule of law itself. And we talked about this last week. It's like gish galloping, right? If he did 8 things last week to break the law in 1 week, right? Then at 8 a week, I mean, how many is that a year? I mean, how many of them can we stay on top of?
Well, and then let's add threatening Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal and claiming that he wants to move all the Palestinians out of Gaza. We can just keep adding them and adding them. And then there's Elon Musk getting into the software of the Treasury. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah, it does go on and on. And so I think it's very significant that the New York Times is saying this is a president committed to breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not that they're not using euphemisms. They're not saying he's pushing the boundaries of executive authority. This is a presidency based on lawlessness, which is what we predicted when we tried to warn the public that this man is a malignant narcissist. Okay. To get back to psychiatry. Okay. This is what malignant narcissists do. And this is why it was so important that the nation should have listened to us, and the mainstream media should have given us a platform to warn people that this is the real thing, that this is someone who has the same personality disorder as Hitler. It's a diagnosis that describes these types of grandiose, murderous dictators. And Trump fits the pattern. And so by not knowing that, now everyone's surprised.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because, John, what you're saying is that hypomanic personalities make powerful politicians. Hypomanic people with malignant narcissistic personality disorders make for charismatic dictators.
Exactly. Well put. That's exactly right. Well, speaking about the Treasury, so I actually didn't put up an article about this because we were running out of time. We're going to show Elizabeth Warren talking about it, but this aroused the opposition among the Democratic politicians. They all went to the Treasury, right, to protest this. What Elon Musk has done, so people understand, is that he demanded to have access to the payment system that the U.S. Treasury uses. So this is literally the nation's checkbook. Think of that. This is where we actually cut the checks for the trillions of dollars that we spend on everything. Okay. When he tried to get control of this payment system, the acting secretary of the Treasury said, no, that's illegal. You can't do that. And so what they did was they put him on administrative leave, and Trump's handpicked new secretary of the Treasury said, sure, go ahead. Go on in. Go take your team of 6 teenagers and go and just absolutely have your way with the federal system. And there's all kinds of dangers, right, that this brings up, some of which are really obvious. One of which is that they're showing a willingness, right, to do anything they can to stop spending on anything they don't agree with. So, for example, you're right, he cannot get rid of the USAID without congressional approval. So instead, what he did today is he put all the USAID people on administrative leave.
And cut the funding.
Well, I mean,
he cut the funding.
He cut the funding. Right. But in other words, this is what he wants to do. In other words, if he controls the physical checkbook, right? Congress can allocate money for something. He can impound it or refuse to do it. It can be brought to court. But the bottom line is he's holding the pen. Okay. He doesn't have to cut the check. That's how much they're trying to get into the guts, right, of the plumbing, of the infrastructure, things that no president or party would have ever considered to be an option.
And we've never even thought of. You and I didn't even think about it as a possibility. Who did?
No, I mean, in all our nightmares, that wasn't even one that we considered. And so the other thing, of course, they can do is write checks to their friends. Okay.
Well, yeah, they can do anything. Let's show what Elizabeth Warren has to say.
Yeah, let's show what she has to say about it.
I just want to be clear about what's going on here. The system that makes sure that your granddad gets his Social Security check, the system that makes sure that your mom's doctor gets Medicare payment to cover her medical appointment, and the system that makes sure that you get the tax refund that you're owed has been taken over by Elon Musk. And every organization from your state government that uses federal money on that bridge project to the local Head Start that takes care of little kids while their mommies and daddies go to work, is now at the mercy of Elon Musk. Elon just grabbed the controls of our whole payment system, demanding the power to turn it on for his friends or turn it off for anyone he doesn't like. Now, there's a second problem here. It's not just payments from the federal government that are now in Elon's control. Elon and his handful of friends now have full access to your personal and financial information that's in the system. Your payment history, your Social Security number, your bank account numbers. Elon now has the power to suck out all of that information for his own use. And there is a third problem. In order for this handful of programmers to gain access to our $6 trillion payment system, we don't know what safeguards were pulled down. Are the gates wide open now for hackers from China, from North Korea, from Iran, from Russia? Heck, who knows what black hat hackers all around the world are finding out about each one of us and copying that information for their own criminal uses. Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies are determined to take over this government to make it work better for themselves and worse for everyone else. And this is just the start. As we gear up for the tax fight, it will become even clearer that Trump will open the doors for his billionaires and giant corporations to find more ways to loot the government at your expense. Meanwhile, everyone else pays more for groceries, more for housing, more for prescription drugs, and more for health care. When unelected billionaires start ransacking our government offices, This is not business as usual. Nope, nothing is normal. We are living a nightmare created by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and we need to wake up. We need to use every tool we have to fight back.
It's great to see Elizabeth Warren, getting some fire again. Again, she's always been great, but she really hammered it in this one, don't you think?
She did, and we didn't have time, but Chris Murphy made a great speech. Jamie Raskin made a great speech. I think the Democrats are starting to wake up and to fight back. Obviously, these are the champions that we're mentioning, the more aggressive champions for democracy in our party. I liked her last line where she said, we need to use every tool we have to fight back. That's the kind of language I've been waiting to hear from Democrats, right? I don't care what it is. If I've got a bottle, fine, then hit them over the head with the bottle. You know what I mean? Anything that I can, any power that I can get my hands on, use it. We've always been so genteel about, well, should we go high? Should we go low? You go any way you can, okay?
Well, let me give you a very quick example. So Tommy Tuberville, the senator from, I think, Alabama, who had been a football coach, when he was in the minority in the Senate, he decided he didn't like the fact that there was a Defense Department policy that women at bases in states that forbid abortion, there was a policy that the Defense Department would pay for their airfare to a state where they could get an abortion. And he didn't like that. So he put a hold on every appointment and every promotion in the military for a year. It even kept the head of the Navy from being appointed. Now, that's something that every senator can do, whether they're in the majority or not, and it can't be changed by a vote. There's no way to do it. So
that's a good example.
So the new senator from Alaska was so furious about what happened at USAID that he's put a hold on any appointment to the State Department. It's done. And what people are saying is the Democrats should be doing that on every appointment for every department. Just stop the whole goddamn thing. They should put a hold on it and let the Republicans seethe about it, but there's nothing they'll be able to do. And this is what Mitch McConnell would have done.
Right.
If we were in Chuck Schumer's place. And we need to start to see people doing that. I think that's what Elizabeth Warren is really referring to.
I think from now on, we really have to ask the question, WWMD, what would Mitch do?
You're right.
Because I'm ready to fight him on the beaches. I'm ready to fight him in the cities. I mean, any
tools they have. They're tools they have.
Right. It's like the Republicans have never found a source of power they wouldn't abuse, and Democrats seem to never find a source of power that they don't have an excuse for not using.
No, it's ridiculous. So let's see what happens. But I think Chris Murphy is extraordinary. I love Elizabeth Warren. Jamie Raskin is a hero of mine. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, so look, I want to get back to immigration. As I've said, I've always been obsessed with the Holocaust. I believe Trump is the American Hitler, and I believe that immigrants are the new Jews. And so we knew things were going to get really, really bad for these people once Trump took over. And I want us to keep remembering them. So yes, we are focusing on Trump's attempt to decapitate the government because that's important. But I don't want us to just forget about these people. Okay. And let's see how it's starting to develop. First of all, you said, Harry, some things are worse than we had even predicted. Now, I had predicted that he was going to build concentration camps for immigrants. And just to remind everybody, not all concentration camps are death camps.
Right.
Concentration camp is when you concentrate an undesirable group of people by ethnic or religious or ideological viewpoints in essentially in an enclosed space they can't leave, like the Japanese internment camps. Okay. So I was expecting that. They were doing that in the first Trump administration when they were doing the child separation policy that caused so much pushback. Was one of the rare cases where he did step back because he got so much pushback, and he was going to fill up those concentration camps with hundreds of thousands of immigrants, and that kind of stalled. Well, now he's doing something even more devilish that I had not predicted. Trump says the U.S. will hold migrants at Guantanamo. The president suggested 30,000 migrants could be housed on the base. It's unclear how the plan will take shape. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people, he said. Some of them are so bad. They're so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back. So we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. Adding 30,000 beds would dramatically expand the government's detention capacity. A site on the 45 square mile base could hold those 30,000 deportees. That site is on the opposite side of the body of water called Guantanamo Bay from the Pentagon's prison for terrorism suspects. So it's 45 square miles. They have room for 30,000 migrants now, but they have plenty of room for expansion. And by the way, it's been reported that they have not ruled out sending children to Guantanamo.
We're going to need coverage. We're going to need people watching it. We're going to need people on this. We really do. Out of sight should not be out of mind.
And I'm just going to show a quick headline, another immigration-related headline that may have missed people's attention. The Trump administration moves to end protection for Venezuelans in the U.S. The decision to terminate temporary protected status for more than 300,000 people signals that President Trump will continue to dismantle a program that aims to protect migrants from potentially dangerous countries. By the way, that number has been upwardly revised upwards to be close to $600,000, 600,000 people. So think of this: 500,000 people who have gone through this very, very difficult asylum process. Right? It's so hard, right, to get in, to prove to an asylum court that you're really under threat. You know, because things are so bad in Venezuela. A lot of these people really feel fear for their lives if they went home. And now, just with the stroke of a pen, we're going to take legal residents, not illegal immigrants. These are legal immigrants who have gone through hell and have gone through the entire administrative process and now are just going to be kicked out. 500,000 people. Yeah.
They're not white Americans, John. What do you expect?
Well, maybe the Latinos who voted for Trump should have thought about that. I want to show you a picture that I knew we were going to see. Now, for those of you who are just listening, there's a man being taken away by ICE agents. They're holding his arm. He's got twist ties around his arms, and he's wearing a shirt that says "Latinos for Trump." So I guess he fucked around and found out. And now here's a little videotape from a very aggrieved Trump voter. What is he aggrieved about? Well, ICE came in the middle of the night and took his wife.
They took my wife.
This man who wished not to be identified says his wife is from Venezuela and has lived in the United States for a few years. She was one of 3 people taken from this home. I'm told the 2 others were men who worked in construction. You see them here. This video, only 1 minute and 52 seconds long, we do not see his wife being removed from the home. But this is a picture of her that he keeps in his wallet. Her name is Vianis Ramirez, and he says she was in the process of becoming a United States citizen.
She already had a court date. She was good. Everything's good. He just came in and snatched her.
These are pictures from the Department of Homeland Security detaining other undocumented men and women in Broward County.
It's despicable what they're doing right now. It's very embarrassing.
President Donald Trump arrived at his Trump National Golf Resort in Doral Saturday, set to host GOP leaders for a conference. This man hopes this message makes it to him.
If I get a chance to talk to you, man, yo, please, man, let's work something out. So you, man, let me keep my wife here in the United States, man. She deserves to be here, man.
Lots of luck, buddy.
Yeah.
Right. Trump's going to be listening to you.
Yeah,
when he's in his golf course.
Sure. Yeah, remember the Venezuelans? Those are the ones who were, sodomizing women on the streets of Ohio. So at least we've got taken care of that problem, right? I'm sure that guy's wife was a potential sodomizer, so I'm glad we got rid of her.
I think it was Haitians in Ohio, but it doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter.
All the same.
They're all the same. They're all the same. I'm sure they're eating cats and dogs too.
All right. What do you have next for us?
All right. So I just want to show you what's happening this morning at your local New Jersey Home Depot. Oh, a lot of cop cars. Pretty intimidating, huh? Let's see what's happening at Walmart.
The cops are here. Everybody evacuating. Literally everybody evacuating the Walmart.
See, now I want to teach people a little something about cause and effect. That was the cause. Now let's see the effect.
That's what you get. Fucking immigration tries to show up, everybody leaves. Not a soul in here. Everybody's out. Fuck, man.
Now that was at Home Depot, for those of you who are just listening, and he was panning the camera around this store, I guess the warehouse or the back, and there literally was not a soul.
Empty.
Totally empty. Let's look at how things are going at Amazon.
Ain't nobody here, bro. Ain't nobody here, bro.
Ain't nobody here, bro. Ain't nobody here. Well, let's see how things are going down on the farm.
I think people will look and say, but wait a minute, they're Americans who are unemployed. Why can't you just hire them?
They don't want to come out here and work in this extreme conditions, 100+ degree temperatures, dust, hard work.
What if you paid them more?
It doesn't matter. We pay some of the highest wages for farm workers in the nation right here in California, and they won't come out. In California, we grow about 50% of the fruits and vegetables and nuts for the country. And any shortage of food like that is going to impact everybody in the nation, because not only will food be less available, it'll be more expensive.
Food is going to become more expensive. For those of you who voted for Trump for the price of eggs, surprise!
Prices of eggs is going up about 20%, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, there you go. I haven't been egg shopping recently, but that's what I hear. So here is a farmer talking about the problem with workers not showing up to his field.
When only 5 pickers showed up this morning to harvest his sweet potatoes, farmer Keith Smith saw possible ruin, the loss of his $500,000 crop.
They're running scared because of this new law.
And you're in trouble.
I'm in trouble.
He's in trouble. I don't know if he voted for Trump, but he's in trouble. There's a lot of pictures of ruined fields. I was thinking of showing them today. We just have so much media, but really powerful images of whole fields of rotted grapes and rotted strawberries because no one showed up to pick the crops.
We predicted this. People have been predicting this for months.
We did. Yep.
And also not just because of rounding up migrants, but also because of the tariffs he wants to impose. Something else we don't have time to talk about.
Yeah, because with that gish galloping, we can't cover everything. We'd have to make the show 5 hours.
No, I know. They were saying the same thing on a morning show this morning, saying we're going to get to everything, but only for a few minutes. It's like taking a machine gun. It just anyway. Next.
No, okay, here's just a brief analysis from just a guy on TikTok, but he really summarizes the data about what's going to happen to the economy if the agricultural sector is affected in this way.
44% of farm workers in the United States today do not have green cards and are working illegally. More than 50% of the farm workers in New York State are working illegally. United States farms contribute over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy. You want to know the fastest way to a recession and everybody eating canned tuna and Chips Ahoy cookies? Deport all the undocumented immigrants, including half the farm workers in the United States.
Well, there you go. There's your ticket to recession and living on Chips Ahoy.
He's very good. I like it.
But Harry, don't worry about that. Okay, do not worry about it, because Stephen Miller is going to explain to you why this is not a problem. Yeah.
How does President Trump make sure that the effort to deport people who are not in this country legally doesn't end up hurting Americans who want safe borders, absolutely, but also don't want to see even more higher prices in groceries?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not your position, Jake, you're just asking the question, that we should supply America's food with exploitative illegal alien labor. I obviously don't think that's what you're implying. Only 1% of alien workers in the entire country work in agriculture. The top destination for illegal aliens are large cities like New York, like Los Angeles, and small industrial towns, of course, all across the heartland, as we've seen with the Biden floods. Mm-hmm. None of those illegal aliens are doing farm work. Those 30,000 illegal aliens that Joe Biden dumped into Springfield.
I'm talking about the ones that are.
But I'm explaining this. It's important to understand.
No, you're kind of changing the subject. I mean, I'm talking about the ones.
I will give me 30 minutes. I'll go as deep as you want on this.
We don't
have
you
30
and your
minutes.
Audience. I don't have a 30. I'm talking about the ones that work in the agriculture industry.
I'm
you
explaining
can come back
to you
and we
your
can
audience.
talk about the ones in the cities. I swear.
I'll do the whole answer. The illegal aliens that Joe Biden brought into our country are not full stop doing farm work. They are not. The illegal aliens he brought in from Venezuela, from Haiti, from Nicaragua, they are not doing farm work. They are in our cities collecting welfare. As for the farmers, there is a guest worker program that President Trump supports. Over time as well, we will transition into automation, so we'll never have to have this conversation ever again.
I guess no one sent the memo about the guest worker program to the sweet potato pickers.
Look, he's Trump loves this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Literally loves this guy.
Yeah.
He is a vicious. Look at the way he speaks. The disrespect toward Jake Tapper. And Tapper, who can be pretty tough, not tough enough.
Mm.
He should have cut him right off and said, we're ending the interview now. Come back when you're ready to answer the questions. Mm-hmm. That's what he should have done. But CNN wants to give the Trump administration a place to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And Tapper knows better. And I predict that CNN is going to get tougher over time.
Well, let's see. That would be an interesting thing to track, right? Let's pay attention to that. Well, look, one of the things that you keep bringing us back to, rightfully, is sources of resistance. So who and how is this being resisted? Now, one of the things that happened this week is online, there was declared that on Monday there would be a kind of an immigrant strike where they wouldn't come into work, they wouldn't spend any money, they wouldn't go to school, to try to kind of be the equivalent of a sort of immigrant general strike. And it had only moderate effects. There were a few downtown areas where some stores were shuttered. It was reported on in some newspapers. So it didn't have no effect. But it was small. And that's, I guess, part of the issue is these stories of resistance are going to at least start out small. And we hope that from little acorns, mighty oaks will grow.
No, I think there'll be a groundswell.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And listen, my point about CNN is not just wishful thinking. What I'm hearing in the panel discussions is more and more of a fierce take on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that will also build.
Good. I hope so too. So here, I'm calling these the resistors of the week. Here are some people who are resisting on the ground level. Actually, I got an email from a colleague at Montefiore. They're actually passing out something called red cards, and red cards are cards that describe what your rights are, even as an illegal immigrant. Okay, and they have them in about 20 different languages. In other words, to help these immigrants know what their rights, because they do have some rights. You know, for example, you cannot be, they cannot come into your home without a judicial warrant, and an immigration violation will not produce a judicial warrant, an administrative warrant, but you have to know the difference. You do not have to, they're setting up checkpoints now around the country where they're stopping people at random points on the road and asking them if they're citizens. You do not have to answer that question. But let's see.
Don't.
And that's the point. Don't answer it. Here's a woman who's, I believe, obviously a citizen, who's refusing to answer the question.
I've never been asked if I'm a citizen before when I'm traveling down the road.
Right. This is an immigration checkpoint.
Right, but we're not crossing a border. Okay. So we're not required, and I know I don't have to answer. You can ask. No, you don't have to. I don't have to answer. I've seen this before. And we did this last year when we were coming back. No, actually, I'm a teacher, and on the national level, we've been talking about this.
Talk about it. I understand.
You can ask me. I don't have to answer.
You are required to answer immigration questions. You are not required to answer any other questions.
Then what's your name? Your badge is covered. Come here.
My badge is Agent Elmo.
I just want to.
E-L-M-O-R-E.
And what is it what's the law that says we have to answer?
If you want to see, hold on. You got the pamphlets in here?
Am I free to go, or are you detaining me?
You are being detained, ma'am.
Okay, I'm being detained on what grounds?
It's an immigration checkpoint, ma'am.
Okay, and so what's the ground? What's the violation for being detained?
You know what? So just for you, here we go. Right here. U.S. Supreme Court. U.S. Martinez Forte.
No, you're covering part of it.
No, I'm my point up here.
Right there.
Checkpoint authority.
So, and it's a checkpoint. We're not actually crossing a border right now, are we?
Checkpoint authority. Held up by the Supreme Court.
When?
These are the cases.
What year?
These are the cases.
What? No, because this is not a recent thing.
It doesn't have to be recent, ma'am.
We don't. So are we being detained?
Yes, you are being detained.
For what?
An immigration inspection.
Right.
Would you like to read this?
No, I don't want to stop. Am I free to go?
No.
I'm not free to go.
You are being detained.
On what grounds?
Right here. I've already told you.
No, you haven't. You've held up a piece of paper in my
INA
face.
287. INA 274.
So I'm being grounded because I won't tell you whether or not I'm a citizen, even though I'm in New Mexico traveling on a highway that's paid for with federal dollars.
Okay, here.
So federal dollars.
I'm reading this.
You already illegally searched my car. You have no grounds for searching my car with a dog.
Actually,
You've been detained and searched by a dog.
Open court. Open air search.
This is interesting. And so
that dog did not go in your car.
So if I just come through and say, yes, I'm a citizen, I can just go ahead.
If the agent's justified by that answer, yes.
Okay, so if I have an accent and I'm brown, can I just say yes and go ahead, or do I have to prove it?
Well, if we want to.
Because I have a bunch of teacher friends who are sick of their kids being discriminated against.
This is a spike.
Okay. No, I'll put it in part. I'll put it in part. There you go. No, I'm just curious because my teacher friends are sick of their kids being discriminated against.
Okay. I'm not discriminating anybody.
I have friends in San Diego who get their children harassed because they immigrated from Mexico. Their kids are born here.
I'm asking you a question.
And they're tired of it.
Okay, I'm asking you a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens to me if I refuse to answer your question?
I'll stay here until you're answered.
I'm a teacher. I'm on vacation. I got time.
If you want to stay here, that's fine.
That's fine.
I'm trying to explain everything to you. I'm showing our authority.
No, I'm very curious about what happens. I'm very curious about what happens.
Right here. Do you want to read this? Oh.
Nope. I want to see what happens when I refuse to say that I'm a citizen or not.
And by the way, they cannot indefinitely detain her for not answering the question. And this is one of the things I went through a lot of these videos to pick a couple for today. If we had time, I'd show more. But in each case, the police were misinforming, claiming they had authority and rights that they actually did not have. And this woman, of course, is sophisticated. She knows her rights, and she's saying, bullshit, I'm not going to do it. We had another one that we cut out where this guy actually was much more abrasive, and she said, "Are you a citizen?" Because I'm not going to answer the question. You need to answer the question. Not going to happen. He's much more abrasive.
No, she's wonderful, but it's so easy for people in authority like police or immigration officers to become authoritarian and to break the rules like that, to take power. It's so easy. It's so easy. Those guys are disgusting. Absolutely.
And here's another one that is even more poignant, because here you hear a girl with a Spanish accent, and the ICE agents are at the door, literally. And she, I always think of it again. I watch a lot of horror. You have to invite the vampire in. He does ask permission to come over the threshold, but once you invite him in, it's all over, right?
It's all over.
It's all over. So here are the ICE agents at the door demanding to come in.
I do not give you any permission to enter my home based on my Fourth Amendment rights.
That's Jasmine recording from her home in Escondido as she reads her rights to federal immigration agents at her door.
I do not wish to speak with you. Answer your questions or sign your hand. You any documents based on my Fifth Amendment rights under the United States Constitution.
Jasmine says they were looking for her uncle, who wasn't home. She says he is undocumented, but has no criminal history. She says she and most of her family in the home are U.S. citizens.
He was like, oh, if you guys don't come out in 5 minutes, we're taking all of you guys.
For her safety, she asked that we not show her face. Jasmine says after a few minutes, the agents went to their car and returned with this paper, an ICE administrative warrant. But she knew they can't come in without a warrant that's signed by a judge.
You have a warrant.
Yeah, warrant's not a problem. If you guys don't
Okay, we don't want to talk. They thought that we were going to open the door for them, but no, like, you know, we have our rights too. Like, we know what to do.
Jasmine says she was glad she was home to hit record and to help protect her family.
It was really scary. And me, like, reading my rights to them, like, it just, like I was shaking in the video when I was reading it to them.
This is just one of several reports of stepped-up immigration enforcement since President Donald Trump took office.
So aside from showing her the fake warrant, they threatened, we're going to take you all downtown if you don't let us in, which is a completely false and empty threat. So hats off to her for her courage, this young person, right? It's really admirable what she did.
And let's hope the word spreads to people, to legal immigrants, to undocumented workers, to legal migrants. Let's make sure they all know that. And I think it's spreading through social media. It's one of the great things about social media. There are many bad things about it, but it really is helpful for resistance. Because this word can go out very, very fast. And
employers are starting to educate, because they don't want to have no workers. They're starting to educate their workers as to what their rights are. If ICE agents show up at the job, they have rights. They can't just drag them out. So, you know, that the employers now maybe are also forming a little bit of a vague resistance because they have an interest in protecting their employees.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, Harry, we have a very appropriate guest today, someone who can tell us about the history of authoritarian movements and resistance to authoritarian movements.
Absolutely. I'm so pleased to have David Ost on the show. David Ost is a recently retired emeritus professor at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, where he taught for many years. But he has a tremendous backstory. David Ost grew up in Brooklyn, and he became an expert in political science and Eastern European politics. He became thoroughly, masterfully fluent in Polish when he was at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And I may have gotten this wrong. Maybe David will correct me, but I believe he went to Poland on a Fulbright. And what he did was his Polish was so good, he would put on a cap and a jacket, and he would hang out in the bars, in the union bars of Solidarity. And he happened to have been there when martial law was declared. And eventually got his way out. And I remember watching many years ago a VCR tape of David on the McNeil-Lair NewsHour as a postdoc, talking about what he saw. From all of his research and his incredible contacts in Poland, he wrote a book in 1989 called Solidarity and the Politics of Anti-Politics. And it was, I think it's considered, not that I'm an expert, but one of the most important books to have ever been written about the Solidarity movement. It had great reception here in the States, but also in Poland. And then in 2005, he published a second volume called The Defeat of Solidarity, Anger and Politics in Post-Communist Europe. And this book got so much coverage in Warsaw and in Poland that there was a weekend newspaper devoted to discussions about Ost, about his ideas. In the last few years, he's been researching fascism, looking at the rise of the right, and he's almost done with a book entitled Red Pill Politics, Right-Wing Populism from Fascism to Today, which will be published by the New Press. Full disclosure, I've known David for about 33 years, and I'm so pleased to have him on the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I've heard about your show, and I'm looking forward to talking with you and with your audience.
So you'll finally see an episode of it.
Well, that's such a fascinating story. One of the questions we've been getting from, our listeners, but also that everyone's asking on TV, all the talking heads are asking, right, is we're seeing this attempted authoritarian takeover. It seems to follow a lot of the typical playbooks of other authoritarian leaders, but people are asking, where is the resistance going to come from? Because right now it's not that clear, right, where it's going to come from or how it's going to emerge. And so I was so excited to hear we were going to be talking to somebody who studied solidarity, because if a movement ever came out of nowhere, right, to challenge an authoritarian and bring down an authoritarian system, that's it. So really, you are, in a sense, the man of the hour, because history rhymes. Where's our American solidarity? Show it to me, brother.
Well, thanks. Look, of course, here's the thing. I mean, resistance never comes out of nowhere, and so there's always got to be some kind of preparation for it. I mean, in Poland in 1980, there had been strike movements in these key cities in Poland. In 1970, again in 1976, people were working underground there. I mean, there was an authoritarian communist system without a free press. Ironically, that may be an interesting topic to talk about, because one of the strange things, although when you think about it, maybe not so strange, is that when you had a explicitly authoritarian dictatorial system, I mean, the Communist Party encouraged a lot of, working class collaboration on the ground level, but from the top, it was an open dictatorship. We don't allow a free press. We don't allow, free independent unions. But what that also meant is that there was this opposition that developed, and the party leadership was never endorsed by a majority in an election. And so any gripes people had, they had against the system. And so what that meant was that, there was this opposition movement emerging that got a lot of support and was able to come forth in 1980. The point I'm making is that, when you have an endorsement in election like happened here in the United States, I mean, we still don't know exactly. Nobody ever knows what people are voting for when they vote, right? There are a million theories, but in the end, someone goes into a voting booth and you just, there's like 200 million subjectivities, right, to figure out. You guys are the psychologists. You can tell more about that. All the political science stuff based on opinion surveys don't tell us much. But, what that means is that that's one reason resistance is a little weak right now, because a lot of people are saying, well, people voted for this. Now, one thing that's relevant is to jump not just from 1980, this fight against the communist system that finally resulted in 1989, with, again, big movement. That's the beginning of the end of the year that the communist system collapsed, first in Poland, then the Berlin Wall. But in 2015, you saw another movement of the right. And that's what my second book deals with, the defeat of solidarity. Because, I had been there. I've been going there basically for close to 50 years now, from 1976. I think was there for the first time, and then this first book was published in 1990, just when the old system collapsed. Then I was doing new research there, and it was democracy. And I found that, I was traveling around, not quite union bars, as you said, Harry, but actually union, but factories. I'd literally go to factories, knock on doors, and get to see the union offices there. And I'd hang out there as people would come in. And I went to union meetings. So, I did do that kind of research there. And anyway, in 2000, what was happening there in the early 1990s is that people were really upset about the new, not just the democracy, but the economic reforms. 1989 was this peak of economic neoliberalism. They got rid of the communist system, and suddenly within weeks, there's high unemployment, inflation, unbelievable. People are losing their jobs. They lost their social services, which in the state socialist system are very big. People were very angry, right? And they didn't know exactly what to do and how to organize against it. And then I began seeing that it was a populist nationalist right, which barely existed, that started organizing against this, because they were able to say that, right, this system, a market system, it's run by aliens, by foreigners. In Poland, there was sometimes a subtext of Jews, people who would change their names. But there was a lot of anger, and the liberal left, as often happens, isn't very good in dealing with anger, in capturing anger. It talks the language of rationality. This is what has to happen. And they were doing that all the time in Poland. And then I started seeing more and more people who were, very angry and started presenting these different theories on what was going on. And then people started saying, oh, well, the liberal government was saying, oh, you're being irrational. We can't listen to you. But in politics, that's not an answer, right? People are going to try to, they have the rights for things too. So I saw this big right-wing turn happen. Yeah. And that's what in fact happened, finally culminating. First, this party won in 2005, but in 2015, they took power and started implementing what was happening here. Now, one last thing, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much already.
No, it's an object lesson for us.
But, in 2015, when that party won elections, and again, it was like a critique of liberalism, of the market economy, coming from the right, because that's an important point. Fascism, as you probably know, fascism at the time was sometimes considered by some, isn't this a left-wing ideology? Because it was critical of elites, critical of capitalism. And back then, mainly the left was critical of capitalism, right? And so, fascism and right-wing populism are these similar kinds of things, in that this populism is really key, right? That they're talking to workers, whereas previously only the left organizes workers. And fascism talks to them and has a different explanation of why things are going wrong. Not class conflict, it's partly, left elites and internal enemies. Anyway, in 2015, as far as resistance, in 2015, they won, and they started dismantling the Constitutional Court, the equivalent of our Supreme Court, within days. Passing these rules like it can't make decisions on this issue. We're going to put new people in, even though the Constitution opposed it. And the Constitutional Court ruled that you can't do this. And they said, well, we're doing it anyway. One time they said, on what grounds? And one of them stood up and said, any laws passed against the nation are lawlessness. And they decide, of course, what's in the interest of the nation. Fascism did that. Right-wing populism did the same thing. So people were very bewildered. But one thing that did happen was, in a month or two, some ordinary citizens with not great connection to politics, but organized something called a Committee to Defend Democracy. And within, I'd have to check, I think probably within 2 months of them coming to power, they had these giant demonstrations in Warsaw. Clear a couple of 100,000 people. Warsaw itself has probably 1.1 million, maybe a bit more. But huge demonstrations in the center of Warsaw. And what's important, why I think we're going to need that soon, is not that the demonstration makes them say, oh, sorry, we're going to stop, right? But what it does do at this moment of hopelessness and of helplessness is that it lets people know that there's a lot of people feeling the same thing, that, oh, it's not just me who thought this was so bad, because right now everyone thinks it's terrible, but everyone sees, well, the Democrats aren't making a lot of, not yelling all over the place. There aren't these mass demonstrations. Maybe I'm peculiar, right? Maybe it's me who thinks it's so crazy. At times when nothing can be done, you try to do something anyway, right? Like,
very good.
You don't know exactly what is true, what is false. You don't know the limits of power. You don't know what's going on there.
This podcast could bring Trump down. It could happen.
Many things. Right.
Stranger things have happened.
The worst thing, right? We can't just,
we can't assume it has no effect. We can't assume that it's hopeless. We can't assume it won't make a difference.
Because we're talking to people, you're changing people's minds. Of course, I taught for many years, and that's, some way of just making people aware of things, So, you try here, you try there, and you also have, I think, self-confidence. And this is something that in Poland, that system lasted 45 years, right? And of course, Poland and East Europe, they've had terrible histories a lot of their times, right? So, it's like we're not used to that here, but sometimes you have to say to yourself, look, it's not a good moment now, right? We're not going to be able to change it right now. But history does change. Leaders do come and they do go. The world doesn't end in this year, next year, and that we carry on, because it's also going to be crucially important in the future how this present will be undone, and if it can be undone.
David, isn't there a very famous Russian book called What Is to Be Done?
Well, sure, yeah, but whatever, that was associated with Lenin, who I used to be a fan of Lenin, and but Lenin, Lenin loved democracy, except any time people were actually voting and doing democracy and didn't support his decision. Then democracy was wrong.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that you said. So you described the timeline. I think these timelines are important because we were talking about this earlier in the show. We'd had a guest, Lori Weiner, who's an expert on Hitler, and she said he collapsed the institutions of democracy in 57 days. I guess the Reichstag fire was the turning point. And of course, when we had her on, this was before the inauguration, and we were saying, well, it's not going to be like that here. There's lots of checks and balances, going to be lots of opposition. He's going to have to go through a lot of court. Harry said that. Actually, I didn't say that.
You were saying the house is on fire. The house is on fire.
And unfortunately, the house is on fire because here we are now through 1 week, and the front page of the New York Times today is saying that it's a blitzkrieg of lawlessness in which he is trying to bring down the rule of law itself by challenging it on every front all at once at a pace that we can't even match. We can't even talk about all the issues on this show. We don't have time. We can't divide our attention that many ways because they're assaulting democracy on so many levels, so aggressively all at once. And I think maybe that'd be part of the reason you're saying that hopefully the opposition will arrive soon or start coalescing soon. I don't know if that was related to your feeling that it needed to happen soon.
Already, you're right that, of course, it's a blitzkrieg, and that's by intention. Things went a little slower in Europe, but also a parliamentary system. Things take a little bit longer, right? America has a peculiar kind of political system. Where the president has extraordinary power if he chooses to use it, right? And, constitutional theorists, have been saying for a long time that, in America, where you do have these courts and they take a long time to figure it out, and then there are all these different decisions, and then there's venue shopping, right, to try to find, the judge that you want right now. And, the president can set in motion a lot of different things. And, and they can't, there's no way just to stop them all. Now, some of the discussion, is it overreach? Trump personally, of course, is not in control of all this, but he's allowed and encouraged all of his minions, to pursue things as fast as they can, as tough as they can. The people in those institutions are going to be key. Many of them will take a buyout. And of course, who knows if even they'll get the money in the buyout.
No one knows.
This is, Musk's promise, you'll get a buyout and in 2 months there's no money. It's like, oh yeah, well, of course. So I know I've heard there's some conflict there, and some people are saying, no, don't take the buyout, stay in. We have to do our job, right? And and it's not clear if and how they can fire us, but they probably can lock us out. Look, it is one of those moments in which we can't just despair that's going on, but we have to acknowledge that this is a blow, the likes of which we've never seen. They're building a system that they themselves don't know what it's going to look like. So sometimes things just fall apart and are not very efficient. I mean, we could think back to what happened, right, in the Iraq War, right? Supposedly they're planning it for months on end. We know this one, we know what we're going to do, and then everything, falls apart quickly, right? I mean, they don't have any control over it. So, they may not have sufficient staff to replace everyone. Now, as and some of the audience has probably heard, in months before coming to power, the Republicans have been gathering names of people, young people who just say yes and will sign you up for positions. A good friend of mine who studies American politics, Joe Lowndes, might be a guy to have on your show, but he told me that he went to one of these conventions, one of the pro-Trump Republican, but not explicitly Republican organization, in Arizona some months ago. And there was a desk where they're signing people up, like we're going to need people to work in the new administration, right? And young people out of college. It's a good career job when other things aren't there, and the criteria, of course, are you going to accept Trump? But look, that also means you get an extraordinary number of untested and largely incompetent, because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They know they're supposed to follow the leader. That's all
they need to know.
Yeah,
as far as Trump is concerned.
No, but David is also saying that they also won't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and so services. Look, people.
Services will fall apart. Absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, Trump is a genius in blaming that on everyone else but him. I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with that, right? Because
it'll all be DEI. It'll all be DEI's fault.
Yeah, right. Because I think he's never in his entire life, right, at least in public, said he ever did anything wrong, right?
That's the nature of his personality disorder. He can't accept responsibility for any action.
Right.
And that's the other thing, David. I'm sure that in your study of political leaders, there are of course some who have severe pathology, like Stalin, who was famously paranoid. But this guy is really unstable. I mean, this thing he did today in announcing that he wants to take over the Gaza Strip and turn it into the resort of the Middle East. That's really not in his interest. I mean, that blew up the Middle East in a way that only he could. And I think it's unstable. I mean, he surprised everyone around him with that. That wasn't something that that was worked out for weeks.
Look, that's, of course, that's what he does. I mean, he must have everyone paying attention to him all the time. I mean, you have to think about him several times a day, right? And that's also a way that that people who don't like it sometimes make the mistake of, then I have to turn off politics altogether, right? Because he dominates. That's, an important reason to read some of the other press, not just the headlines all the time, because he can always monopolize the headlines, right? But, the articles, the press, and in various sites that you find, and have some way to look at it in that way. One of the other things that's happening is, this, apparently oligarchization. I mean, Musk is one of them.
Right.
But, in Poland and in Hungary, when they did this and they started setting up their own people, they're trying to build up a new elite, is to funnel a lot of money to create their own oligarchs, right? To funnel money to their people.
Yeah.
Now, that's, we're going to see that happen, but often, right, that leads to, they're just focusing on their own issues. And again, services break down. People find their daily lives or their schools are not being funded, and that creates certain opposition. I mean, he's going to try to, the press is a big, is a big issue that they're dealing with. In America, one of the interesting factors that is actually quite important is that the New York Times is not a publicly traded corporation. What I mean by that is that if it's a publicly traded corporation, like Twitter was, right, and Musk could buy it out, then legal laws, especially in the United States, you have fiduciary obligations to your shareholders. If you can get maximum money for them, you are legally obligated to pursue that, right? And that's what happened with Twitter. I mean, the so-called, hostile takeovers. And
ABC sold out by Disney.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So some of those things, you might see, right, Musk or one of his associates, perhaps someone whose name we don't yet know, but will emerge as that kind of figure, might well try to buy out more of those things, because you have to do the authoritarianism of nowadays is very determined, but it's also very different than 100 years ago, right? People are different, societies are different, expectations are different, right? And
media is different. I mean,
what you're talking about, the right has bought up all the media properties. Now that they're commercial enterprises, that means they're for sale, or we can influence the shareholders to see it's in their interest to be friendly to right-wing interests, even if they don't sell out to them directly. And so what we're basically, the capitalism of media, or the capitalization of media, has basically allowed the right to slant the coverage. And I think this is what's made it such a bloodless takeover, right? Which is, if you can just hypnotize 55% of the population, right, by giving them a smoothly packaged, consistent diet of misinformation where they're watching slick shows on Fox, and reading their social media. And so you've got their minds. You have control of their minds. You shape the narrative, you shape reality. And so if you're able to do that with a majority of the country, then as far as they're concerned, everything's going fine, because they'll have an explanation for why they're not getting their checks or why services are breaking down. It'll all have to do with more Chinese people invading America, or more immigrants raping people on the streets, or more of the Biden's terrible policies, more of the DEI, hangover, and they'll believe it. And they'll believe it.
Well, look, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not so sure, and maybe they'll believe it now, but maybe not in a year. But that is the crucial thing that I said at the beginning. Yes, we're in a position now where what you say for the foreseeing future for the next several months is likely, right? Things can go all wrong, and it's the cost of transformation. Now we're getting it under control. It's right, DEI, right? It's all these things that were done before. That's the problem, But we know, look, just like a lot of people, tilted in the last direction towards Trump. And I'm sure you've seen, too, some of the explanation for Trump. People are, wondering, is this part of the anti-incumbent mood, right? Because all incumbents have been defeated. In Poland, the right-wing guys lost to a more liberal left coalition, moderate, or centrist coalition that was, upholding liberal democracy, but also because that right-wing government was in power when the inflation went sky high and all that. So, incumbents have been losing, and a lot of people just said, okay, we'll try something else. There's certainly a real core determination of Trumpies that in the near future, nothing is going to be able to challenge.
This is sort of similar to what we were talking about last week. We almost like America has to hit bottom, and they need to put these really incompetent people in charge so that the quality of our lives gets so crappy that finally they can't deflect responsibility anymore. And the populace starts to blame the party in power for all of their misery. Is that sort of part of the
yeah? I mean, I don't know. That's in left-wing lingo, that phrase rings a bell like, oh, the worse it is, the better it is, And unfortunately, I think it usually doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, because, look, the worse it is, you can have, a more extreme opposition, especially in this case. Look, for a number of reasons, like I say, a very different time, a very different period. None of these right-wing governments have come to power, whether it's Poland, Hungary, Turkey, India, perhaps with Le Pen in France. They're not locking up all of their opponents now, right? I mean, you can criticize, there are opposition parties exist. If it gets to this kind of drastic state that you're kind of wishing for a moment ago, a little bit, then, of course, one answer is that, these people are ruining things because, again, make up some lie, right? Because they're at large, right? And then we need some protective custody against them. Look, of course, that might happen. And yes, perhaps that'll blow things up too. I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, if we think back about the fascist past, like I once heard someone say, it was a kind of right-wing supporter of these extreme policies, but it was a right-wing intellectual who knew something about the history of fascism, classic fascism, because some fascists say, well, Hitler, wasn't a fascist. And what this guy said, he said, the problem is that Hitler gave fascism a bad name. the problem, right? We have to kill some people, but I mean, don't try to take over the whole world and kill millions of Jews, just, men, women, and children. I mean, you really just blew it, right?
Yeah, he took it a step too far.
Yeah, and now all the fascists after 1945 had disguised their fascism.
Yeah, fascism in moderation. Fascism in moderation.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's and that is the kind of thing that's happening now. One thing to keep in mind, and I think this is part of the appeal of that new populist right. I mean, my book is called Red Pill. I'm not going to explain it here. You'll have to read the book, but it's an acronym for, right-wing, exclusionary, nationalist, democratic, populist illiberalism, blah, blah. It's a big word, but it makes the acronym Red Pill, because those kinds of things are what drove fascism once and is driving this current right-wing populism. But look, the point is that those kinds of policies were totally gone after World War II. And ironically, that right-wing politics, that fascist populist politics that we see now is the only politics that can legitimately say that we had nothing to do with the creation of the entire post-World War II order.
Fascinating. Right? David, listen, we're running out of time. It's so great to have you. I just have one last question for you, if it's all right with you, John. So look, what in the near term, what should we be looking for, and what should we be hoping to see?
Well, look, we cannot predict, again, what Trump is going to come out with. We also have to not take all the feints. And even, I'm afraid, talking too much about this lunatic Gaza plan, right? Kind of takes us away from the takeover of federal government, Musk's access to the Treasury.
I agree.
Things like this,
It's a head fake.
But I mean, what we need, and I think it's okay that it's not happening right now. Personally, I'm not yet, like other people, I'm not yet so crazed that the Democrats are not shouting all the time, because if they started shouting from day one along, first of all, I wouldn't quite know what to shout about, but also they fit a little bit too much into that Trump narrative that I think some moderates accept, that no matter what Trump does, everyone hates him, so you can't take it seriously.
But they are starting to shout. We showed that earlier in the Treasury thing, all the Democrats that went to the Treasury. Yeah.
And so what I think will be crucial and important and will make a difference is, I think, in a couple of months in spring, giant rally in Washington of people who are, very angry, speeches, again, talking to each other, workshops. We're going to act at this level, because there are a lot of people who don't like this, right? They don't know what to do now, and that's okay. In other words, they've succeeded in disorienting people and in step after step and flooding the zone. And right now we're very much on the defensive. But again, things change, and you exist and you continue to do it. When there's some giant demonstration like this, again, people will see, then there'll be things happening elsewhere. And, really we'll take it from there. There's no recipe, but it's not eternal, guaranteed.
Thank you, David. That's a great place to stop. So wonderful to have you. We'd love to have you back on in a few months, and we can see how things are playing out.
It's going to take time. We're taking steps. We have resources to use, but we're going to have to learn to do things differently. And we will, right? I mean, that's the only hope. And I believe it will happen. But again, people have to take their part. It won't just happen if you think someone else will do it.
I'm going to get a Lech Walesa cap, and I'm going to start hanging out at the union bars, and it's going to all take off from there.
All right.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for coming. Really appreciate your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Take care. So long.
Thank you.
What a nice interview.
Yeah, very timely.
Important. It's so good to have someone who can really walk us through the history, since we seem to be living a kind of nightmare history at the moment.
Yeah.
I just want to say that about a month ago, we had two guests, a couple, Simone Adams and Josef Rabenauer, who are two therapists, also spiritual seekers, on the show. And a lot of people found them very helpful. They happen to be friends of mine. And they let us know that they have launched a website, and they have a podcast, which is going to be launched on Monday, but you can see their intro video and subscribe to it. So I want to make sure I put it on the screen for everyone to see. Meta Meaning is the name of their website. They have articles and interviews, and they also have their podcast. Just take your camera and use the QR code, and it will take you to the site.
Well, Harry, I guess we're up to the shrink wrap section of our show. What have we learned today?
Well, we've learned to be shocked.
Yeah.
We've learned to be pushed past even what you were afraid of to things that are even worse. And that includes, from a psychological point of view, someone like Elon Musk, who is really out of control.
Yeah.
He is unbridled. We worried about Trump not having guardrails.
Yeah.
We didn't worry about Elon Musk not having guardrails. I mean, it's even worse. And I think we have to have diligence. I was thinking about this balancing act that we all have to perform. And someone I was working with in therapy was talking about her fear of death. Now, this is a woman who's not dying. There's no disease process that's killing her. But she's in her early 70s and she's anticipating the end of her life. And she asked me, since I'm about, 8 years younger, how was I handling it? And I said, mostly through denial. Here I am in Paris for 3 months.
A free man in Paris, unfettered and alive, and you may only be free for 3 more months. Because I think they're gonna fetter you.
Yeah.
In Guantanamo.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not ready to be taken to Guantanamo just yet. But my point being, though, that I'm doing something that is very important to me that I worked on for a couple of years, and there are people back home I really care about and are anxious to see again. But I'm also really involved in this life here. So she said to me, well, that's your denial. I said, yeah, but I'm not always in denial about my death because I know someday that will happen. Mm-hmm. And what I told her was, when I'm able to really think about it and experience that fear of death, I kind of bring it into my current life, and it makes life that much more precious to me. I'm that much more grateful. That kind of process for me individually about facing death, I think there's a similar process that we can do when thinking about this terrible, terrible thing that's happening to our democracy. It's a battle. It's vicious. It's ferocious. And we have to fight like hell. But we cannot forget how grateful we should be for being alive, for the love we have in our life, for the things that bring us joy. And we have to make sure we experience those every day, even though every day we should be doing something to fight this thing that's happening by being informed, by talking to our friends, and doing one thing each day. That's what at least I think I've been learning.
Yeah, I think there's this juxtaposition over the show between the fact that things seem to be collapsing at such a rapid rate, this blitzkrieg, where they're just decapitating the government in 100 different ways, so many that we can't keep track of them, undermining the rule of law itself. And that's the point, right? Doing things that are blatantly illegal to arrogate power and see if anyone can stop him. And so far, we don't know who can or will. So it's a very, very scary time. And our guest reinforced that, acknowledged that. But having studied the emergence of democracy in Poland, he also gave us a different time sense and a different sense of hope.
Yes,
it took them 45 years. And I've often said, Harry, I don't know that you and I will live to see the resolution of this. I mean that. I am not optimistic that I will live to see the resolution of this. I do believe there'll be a resolution, but I don't believe that I necessarily will live to see it. These things take time, right? When an authoritarian government has taken over a country, you don't just get rid of them in the next election cycle. It's a process, and it begins with people standing up in ways that seem as if they would make no difference and really are in a sense irrational, right? I mean, why irrationally stand up to authority if you're not going to change the outcome and you're just going to put yourself at risk? And yet his experience in Poland with this labor union that became the kind of organizing force to get rid of communist dictatorship gives us some hope. There was also, though, a lesson in what he said, which is then when the liberals took over, then people were dissatisfied with this and dissatisfied with that, and then they went back and picked another right-wing authoritarian government.
And that government was overturned again in the last year or two. And I am not as certain as you are that we won't see the resolution of this in our lifetime. I'm still hopeful. I want to see how this resistance plays out, and I want us all to do it together. Please, we all have to be mindful. And at the end of the show, I always say, we're here every week. Tell your friends, and that's just, I mean it, but this time I really mean it. Like, you should pass this show and other shows, The Bulwark, Rachel Maddow, whatever you can to pass to people. Don't just get depressed about this. Do something.
Well, Harry, as a psychologist, I'm really able to get inside of people's heads, and I've really been channeling Elon. I've really been getting inside of his head and sort of figuring out how he ticks.
John, we talked about this. Just because you get him doesn't mean you have to be him.
I know, but there's some evil satanic force that just seems to be taking me over. It's like an exorcism. It's like Elon Musk is rising within me.
Look, things rise within me when I think of Elon Musk, but that's not exactly the same thing you're experiencing.
I have all the power.
Oh, God.
I'm going to throw American government into the wood chipper so high status white males like me can rule the world.
Please don't. Please don't.
They call me Chainsaw Musk. I'm tearing the country a new asshole.
Well, that makes sense. It takes one to tear one. So what happens to the money for medical research, Elon?
What?
USAID? Money for starving children and wounded veterans?
Decapitated!
Social Security and Medicaid?
Die!
Democracy itself?
Rex.
Yeah, they like the way I do this. When I crank it like a chainsaw.
Crack it like a chainsaw. Yeah, crank it like a chainsaw.
Hey, John.
Crank it like a chainsaw.
John, can you cut your empathy? Come back to us?
Yeah, I'm gonna cut off the head of the American government. Crank it like a chainsaw. Whoop, whoop. Crank it like a chainsaw. Whoop, whoop. Crank it like a chainsaw. Whoop, whoop.
Terrible. You're just an awful little man.
I am. I'm gonna crank it like a chainsaw and tear this country apart for all the rich billionaires. Hit it, Rex.
All right. We'll see you next week. I promise the real John will be back next week.
Crank it like a
Thanks for being with us.
chainsaw.
See you next time.
Goodbye, government.
Good night, Elon.